เรื่องของ Crazy Horse
Welcome to Crazy Horse Memorial, which honors the North American Indian, all tribes. It's a mountain carving and much more. This is how the non-profit memorial will look when completed, a vast educational and cultural center. It'll include the Indian Museum of North America and a university and medical training center for the North American Indian. The focal point is the mountain, where the face of Crazy Horse was completed and unveiled in 1998. That was on the memorial's 50th anniversary, which included the first blast of the second 50 years of progress. Lakota elders picked Crazy Horse for the mountain carving, and they insisted the memorial be located in the Black Hills. The hills are revered by Native people, such as Olympic champion Billy Mills.
Crazy Horse Memorial, I think, needs to be, it represents two things to me. It represents the integrity of our elders who asked Korshak to build a monument honoring one of our chiefs in our sacred Black Hills. And that is a commitment we should never lose sight of. Just as I will never ever lose the feeling, the sacredness of the Black Hills to me. Our elders made a commitment. They went to Korshak to build a monument honoring our people, our way, our culture, our values. I think the elders were not only correct, I think it was visionary to put a man who I think is sacred, his image is sacred, and to place it in the Black Hills, which is sacred. It's the only place it could have been.
To carve the mountain, the elders picked sculptor Korczak Ziolkowski, whose physical appearance changed along with the mountain. Following his death in 1982, the project's been continued by his wife Ruth and their large family. 1939, the sculptor's dramatic marble portrait of Paderewski won first prize at the New York World's Fair. That gave Chief Standing Bear and his fellow chiefs the idea to invite Korczak to the Black Hills.
You know, I've been in Auburn since I was a year old. I was born in Boston. And I was brought up by an Irish prize fighter. And I always told him when I was 16 I was going to beat, but I was just going to whip him, that's all. When I was 16 I couldn't quite do it, so I left him. I went to work on the waterfront. And I always said I wanted to do something worthwhile with my life. And I wanted to become a sculptor. And then one day when I was 13, I read about this man Baldwin carving a mountain. Little thinking that about 16 years later I was going to be working as his assistant on Mount Rushmore. Then I got a letter from this old Indian I'd never met, Standing Bear. And he asked if I'd build a memorial to their people, so the white people know that their men had great heroes also. Well, having brought myself up, and being American of Polish descent, I thought that wasn't too much to ask for. And I had no place to go, so I decided to dedicate my life doing this.
Korczak felt both the glory and the tragedy of the Native Americans were reflected in Crazy Horse's short life and death. His sculpture shows Crazy Horse declaring proudly, "My lands are where my dead lie buried."
He was a spiritual leader, he was a warrior. He portrays what I see as a Lakota, a spiritual existence, a spiritual being living a human experience. And that was Crazy Horse.
Crazy Horse was one of the strategists at the Battle of the Little Bighorn. Never signed a treaty and refused to live on a reservation. He was stabbed in the back by a soldier while under a flag of truce. Crazy Horse died on September 6, 1877. Korchak was born 31 years later on that same day, September 6th. Many Native Americans consider that an omen he was destined to carve Crazy Horse. The memorial began very humbly. Korchak lived in a tent the first 7 months. Like a pioneer, he cut trees to build a log studio home. There was nothing here, no roads, water, or electricity. When he started work on the 600-foot-high mountain, Korchak was almost 40 and had only $174 left to his name.
Can you imagine how humble I started with the mountain? I started with a single jack, that's a hammer and a steel. And I drilled my holes around 3-4 feet deep and blew them off. Then I bought an old compressor. It was 24 years old, an old Buddha, weighed around 4 tons. And I put a pipeline 2,440 feet long from the compressor on the ground up to the top of the mountain. And I bought a jackhammer. Now this took 2 years to get all this done. And then I bought another hammer, and then my steel. Dynamite is rather expensive, and my electric caps. So for the first 7 years, I climbed up 741 steps, and I carried everything up on my back. When I grew up, I stopped the big compressor. I used to crank it, you know, and I put a 50-pound box of dynamite in one shoulder, and put a wire, a string of bits around my neck. Then I'd take maybe an 8 or 10 or 12, 14-foot steel in my left hand, and that's how I start up the mountain. The old Buddha, the old compressor, was kind of decrepit, and I'd get sometimes part of the way up, and I'd just hear that thing go kaput, 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 kaput. Put everything down, walk all the way down the staircase, start up again, crank it up, wait there 5 minutes, start up the mountain, pick everything up, go up to the top, which is quite a distance, put all my things down, get my air valve cleaned out, oil the hammer, pick it up, get my starter steel in it, just start to drill one hole, get down about a foot, and you can hear the big Buddha, kaput, kaput, kaput. Down I go again. One day I did that 9 times. You know, that gets awful old. Oh, I tell you, that walk up and down there is terrible.
Korchak worked alone for years, but mountain goats kept him company. The goats loved the staircase, and they climbed it right along with Korchak. They've never left in spite of the decades of blasting. The old Buddha symbolized the severe financial hardship, but there also was joy. Korchak married Ruth Ross, and they began their family of 10 children, 5 boys and 5 girls. Korchak even delivered one of them. There were so many kids in school at one time, they attended their own one-room school at Crazy Horse. They also learned by helping their parents in rather unusual ways.
Well, see now, you see why we had 10 children. They were all, the boys were necessary up on the mountain, and the girls were necessary down here to help Mother with the visitors. That was rather hard work to keep on pounding that dynamite in.
The first blast took off only 10 tons. It was at the June 3rd, 1948 dedication, attended by 5 survivors of the Battle of the Little Big Horn. Comparing then and now shows the dramatic change, with more than 8 million tons of granite blasted off so far. The progress is measured in tons and in decades. The first rock removed was from the area in red, in front of Crazy Horse's face. It took Korchak 5 years working alone. Next, he leveled this area in red above the arm, which will be more than 200 feet long. Cutting the tunnel under the arm was the hardest part. When finished, that huge opening could hold a 10-story building. It took more than a decade to remove this area. It's in front of the horse's head, which will be 219 feet high. Korchak had blocked out much of the sculpture before he died. Since then, his family and others have removed over 1 million more tons. For size perspective, picture Mount Rushmore, where these marvelous heads are 60 feet high. All 4 heads on Rushmore combined would fit in just Crazy Horse's head, which is almost 9 stories tall. Carving Crazy Horse is an unlikely marriage of the fine arts and explosives engineering on the grand scale. But how do they actually carve a mountain? It's done with drills and explosives. and every blast involves at least 24 separate steps. Korchak already has carved Crazy Horse. His sculpture is being enlarged down the mountain. To do that, thousands of manual and electronic measurements are taken from Korchak scale models. Not all days on the mountain are picture perfect. Wind, heat, cold, rain, lightning, snow, ice, any can make the job miserable and more dangerous. The crew works year-round. They use a combination of handheld as well as machine drills. The precise measurements fix the location and the spacing of each borehole. The adage in the industry is, the secret of good blasting is good drilling. Access for the cumbersome equipment usually has to be created by blasting out a ramp or a road. That takes time and adds to the cost of a blast. Several kinds of high explosives are used on Crazy Horse. Blasters load very systematically, always with the highest respect for the explosives. In every aspect of mountain carving, safety is number one.
And the system that we've got now is noiseless lead line. And this just sets off a small spark, which is a lot safer than electric caps. 5, 4. Fire in all! Fire in all! Fire in all!
The remaining blast fragments are bulldozed. It looks hair-raising, and it is. Casimir Zhukovsky recalls the incident of the flying cat.
The brakes went out of the cat. I went off that edge, went over my dad, and the cat went all the way to the bottom, or the top of the mud pile. And I bailed out, and I went about 70 feet or so, I suppose. And my dad probably thought I was dead. And once he realized I was alive, he said, "You got it in there, you get it out."
Carving a mountain is an unusual profession. You're up there 600 feet in the air looking down, and to me, I just marvel at them. And I not only marvel at their abilities and the fact that they completed the face, and it's so perfect with the model, but they also have caught enough of the dream.
Crazy Horse is the largest sculpture in the world, on a scale higher than the Washington Monument or the tallest Egyptian pyramid. Overall, the Crazy Horse Colossus will be 563 feet high and 641 feet long. And the entire mountain is being carved three-dimensionally in the round. One of the finishing tools is a dangerous supersonic torch. Following completion of Crazy Horse's face, work began on the massive horse's head. It'll be 22 stories high. The ears will be 42 feet long, nostrils more than 30 feet in diameter. All the progress is guided by Korchak's scale models and books of measurements he prepared for that purpose. 18 years younger than her husband, Ruth Zhukovsky has directed the project since Korchak's death. 7 of their sons and daughters work with her in a dynamic team effort. The visiting public also plays a key role because all the revenue for the nonprofit memorial comes from admissions, contributions, and gift sales. Crazy Horse is not a federal or state project because Korchak felt the interested public and not the taxpayer should finance the memorial. He believed so strongly in the free enterprise system, he twice turned down $10 million in potential federal funding. He felt the government would not complete the mountain carving and would not carry out the project's humanitarian goals. Ruth and their family share that philosophy.
The financial philosophy here at Crazy Horse has remained the same over all the years. Korchak believed in individual initiative and private enterprise. He didn't think that you had to stand around with your hand out waiting for the government to finance a project. This project has been financed entirely by people coming in here and with their contributions and admissions. And it is not a federal or state project, it will not be. We could go faster if we had more money, and it's people like yourselves who make this all possible. It doesn't have to be cash. Our museum, 90% of the items there have been gifts that we can share with others. We have a lot of equipment that has been given to us for the mountain. The explosives on the mountain are quite frequently gifts. And there are a lot of ways that people can help with things other than cash. And it's definitely a family project. And each one of the youngsters has a niche that they fill, a job that he or she does, and they can use their individual talents. And it's truly a family project. And it's wonderful to see them taking over so that you know there's continuity into the future.
Dad made it special, Dad and Mom made it special, and it's just that it's a dream, and it's a dream that can become reality. And it's important to be a part of that.
I do see it as something a lot bigger, and I see it as a lot more pressure on us to make sure that it keeps going. You have to work harder to keep it going. It's a lot more work than it was, 5, 6, 7 years ago.
To me, it's the only job that I want to do for the rest of my life. He left us a letter that he wrote in 1952, and we never saw it until after he died. And he said in that letter that you don't have to do this, but if, after I'm gone, you take up the task of doing it, don't ever let it go.
I think it was born in us, the ones that chose to stay. I don't know about the others, but I'm assuming they feel the same way, that I don't belong anyplace else. I like to go and visit, but I belong here.
Always at the heart of the memorial is Crazy Horse himself. He is a hero to many people, like Olympic gold medalist Billy Mills.
Crazy Horse is my hero for many, many reasons. I'm a member of the tribe, Oglala Lakota. Crazy Horse is Oglala Lakota. And growing up, we'd hear about Crazy Horse. Just the simple fact when he is asked, "Where are your lands now, Crazy Horse?" And he points and says, "My land is where my people lie buried." I've identified with that. The memorial to me represents actually one of our greatest values, one of the greatest traits we can have as Lakota people, and that's storytelling. It represents the past. I look upon myself as a Native person as a